Hello, welcome to In the Garden. I'm your host, Joyce Hochbrunn, McLeod County Master Gardener. We're taking a little different format today, hoping it works out, but we'll see what happens. We're going to be talking about native plants for your gardens. And I'm mainly trying to pick plants that are native to Minnesota and to McLeod County for the most part as well. We'll be talking about some plants, some shrubs, and a few underused trees. So let's get started. Why should you plant natives? Well, natives tend to be low maintenance, at least if you plant them in the conditions they like. If you plant something that likes it wet and you plant it on a dry hillside, you kind of lose that low maintenance factor. But for the most part, they are lower maintenance. They attract local pollinators. They can produce some really beautiful flowers. In fact, I'm betting you're already growing some natives and you may not even know they are natives. Native plants can handle some of the problem areas in your yard. You've got an area that always stays wet. Well, maybe not the last couple of years, but normally. And there's a plant or a shrub for that. Or you've got a dry spot. There are plants and shrubs that will tolerate that. And they also serve as food and shelter for wildlife. Some sourcing things. Do purchase nursery propagated seed and plants from reliable sources. Don't collect from wild populations without landowner permission. And even if you have permission, there are certain populations, say lady slippers, that just shouldn't be disturbed because you might kill off the entire population. So it's best to buy those things from native plant nurseries and ask how they're propagated. Don't purchase the meadow in a can blends that you see at every gift shop and whatever. A lot of those contain invasive plants that we really don't want to get seeded out there, and they're probably not meant for Minnesota. Take a look at your site, see what conditions you have to deal with, what's your soil like, what's the sun, shade, is it a moist area, a dry area? Then prep it, get rid of the weeds, dig it up if you need to, add compost if you need to. Choose plants to match your site, plant it, and keep it watered until it's established. Usually that's the first year. And now let's get started on a few plants. Bloodroot, Sanguinaria canadensis. That is native to almost all of Minnesota. It's a spring ephemeral, which means it comes up, blooms in the spring, and then at some point during the summer it simply goes dormant and disappears. Bloom time is early spring. It's one of the first things that blooms in my garden. It likes medium wet to medium soil, not soggy but not too dry, and it's about 6 inches tall. Woodland phlox, or Phlox divaricata. That's native to most of southern half of Minnesota. The colors range from a pale blue, kind of a lavender, to violet. It likes shade to part shade. And it's about 12 inches tall, medium moisture. Don't confuse it with Dame's rocket. I hear a lot of people, and I see people posting pictures online of Dame's rocket going, oh, look at the pretty wild phlox. And I'm going, no, Dame's rocket's really invasive. Don't plant it. I mean, you may not be able to eradicate it if you have it in your woods, but at least don't plant it. And we're going to go to a picture here shortly of some Dame's rocket and how you can tell the difference. Dame's rocket has 4 petals. Phlox, I don't care what kind of phlox, always has 5 petals. So if you see something that's got 4 petals and you're thinking it's wild phlox, it's not, it's Dame's rocket. It's non-native and invasive. It crowds out other natives. It blooms about the same time as Phlox divaricata. And the colors range from kind of a milky white to a lavender pink. Angelica, and this is Angelica atropurpurea, is the one that's native to Minnesota. Mainly native to the Mississippi River Valley, but it will grow throughout Minnesota. It gets 5 to 7 feet tall. So it's a statement plant. It prefers moist soil and it's tolerant of alkaline soils, which we tend to have in parts of McLeod County here. And then we come to a common everyday columbine, or Aquilegia canadensis. Now the native one is just that kind of red and yellow one, or kind of sometimes pinkish and yellow. It's native to almost all of Minnesota, gets to about 2 feet tall. It'll grow in full sun, it'll grow in shade, medium to dry soil, and it doesn't care if the soil is acidic or alkaline. And it's a great pollinator plant. And here's one that was new to me when I started researching some of this. It's called tall bellflower, Campanula americana. It's native to the southern half of Minnesota. It's a reseeding annual or biennial, depending on when it reseeds and when it germinates. It likes part sun to shade, 3 to 5 feet tall, and the bloom time is any time between July and October, depending again on when it germinated. Medium wet to medium dry soil. And then there's another little diminutive one, Dutchman's breeches. Native, the leaves look kind of like a bleeding heart. It's native to almost all of Minnesota. It's a shade plant, about 12 inches tall, another spring ephemeral, and it's white to pale pink. And it gets its name because the flowers look like little Dutch bloomers hanging upside down. Medium wet to medium soil. Then we have bellwort, which the botanical name is Uvularia grandiflora. Now, if that one doesn't just roll off your tongue, it's native to most of Minnesota, part shade to shade, 12 inches tall. It prefers a medium wet to medium dry soil. It spreads by rhizomes, but slowly. It's not one that's going to just take over quickly. It's got a little dangling yellow flower and it blooms in early spring. Good for the pollinators. Rose or swamp milkweed, Asclepias incarnata. It's native to almost the entire state. Some of you are probably already growing it. Part shade to full sun, 3 to 4 feet. It prefers moist soil. And later, especially later in the summer when it tends to get hot and dry, it can be prone to yellow asters, or to yellow aphids, sorry. So try to keep it watered if you can. When it gets really dry and hot, that's usually when you start seeing problems with the aphids. Sometimes you can just blast them off with a shot of water, but it doesn't work every time. Another milkweed is showy milkweed, or Asclepias speciosa. It's native to most of Minnesota, 3 to 4 feet, and this one prefers it drier, medium to dry soil. It does spread by rhizomes, so you want to keep an eye on it, but it's less aggressive than common milkweed, and it likes full sun. And another milkweed, Sullivan's milkweed, Asclepias sullivantii. This is native to the tall grass prairies, which is this area of the state. It likes full sun. It's 3 to 4 feet. It spreads by rhizomes again, but it is less aggressive than common milkweed, which, as you know, give it an inch and it will take a mile. And it likes a medium soil moisture. And my last milkweed family one is butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa. That's another native in most of Minnesota, 2 feet, full sun. It needs good drainage, especially in the wintertime. This one is tap-rooted, so plant it where you want it, because moving it could prove challenging. It does like a medium to dry soil, also red and yellow. Now, it took me about 3 tries to get this one established because I have kind of a heavy clay here, and on a wet year, it's not a happy place. I finally found a spot at the top of a slope where it has been happy and hanging out now for a few years. So siting this one is important. Then we're going to get to some of the asters. There's silky aster, and that's native to all but the northeast corner of Minnesota. 1 to 2 feet and full to part sun, medium dry to dry soil, and that September-October bloom that, you know, when we don't want the season to end. So this is a good one for that. And this is one I'm guessing a lot of you are already growing, New England aster. And I'm not even going to try the botanical name on this one. You can look at the slide and figure it out on your own. But this is native to almost all of Minnesota. It likes full to part sun. It can get up to 5 feet tall, some varieties. Like some medium wet to medium dry soil, not soggy, not too dry. This one probably has the most color choices in asters. And again, fall bloom. And it's, there are some cultivars that stay shorter. There's let's see, Purple Dome, I believe, is one of them, and Vivid Dome, which is a hot pink. There also are ones that are much taller, but you can pinch them up until like early July to keep them a little bit shorter and bushier. Then we go to, oops, I skipped one here. There we go. Smooth blue aster. This one's native almost statewide, full to part sun, 4 feet tall, very sturdy stems, has rhizomatous roots, which usually kind of sends up red flags because, you know, rhizomes, you think of quackgrass and common milkweed, but this one is kind of a non-aggressive one. It's a slow-moving rhizome. And again, fall bloom. And then one of my favorites, doesn't do as well down here as it seems to up around St. Cloud and later soils, but white prairie clover, Dahlia candida. It's native to most of Minnesota, full to part sun, 2 to 3 feet, and medium to dry soils, and blooms in July and August. And then right along with it is its cousin, purple prairie clover, Dahlia purpurea. So whenever you see purpurea in a botanical name, that's telling you purple or reddish, usually. It kind of gives you a clue right there. Again, native in most of Minnesota, 18 to 24 inches, full to part sun, medium to dry soil, and it needs good drainage. It's tap-rooted, and it's one of the superfoods for the rusty patch bumblebee, which is on the endangered species list. And this one, if you see it in a restored prairie or a native prairie area, you'll just kind of see patches throughout the prairie in certain areas. So it's just kind of a nice purpley haze when you look at it. Okay, then here's kind of a fun one that's unique. Bottle gentian, Gentiana andrewsii. It's native again to most of Minnesota. Full to part sun, about 2 feet tall. The soil is medium wet to medium. It's a slow growing plant. So unless you're a really patient person, you probably want to start with plants that you purchase and not seed. We'll go down to the next one. There's another gentian, downy gentian, and that's native to about southern half of Minnesota. Full sun to part shade, 12 inches tall. This one likes it a little on the drier side, although it does not like intense heat and prolonged drought, such as what we've had the last couple of summers. So it maybe that range starts moving a little further north. Bloom time is in the fall, and it blooms open during the day. The blooms open up, and then they close at night or on cloudy days. And the two gentians are a couple of the bluer plants in nature. And then we come to sneezeweed, Helenium autumnale. It's native to most of Minnesota, full to part sun, 4 feet, so it's one of the taller ones, but there are shorter nativars that have been bred in the market. Wet to medium soil and late summer, early fall bloom usually. And there's yellows and rusts and kind of orangey colors. It does not like to dry out though, so the last couple summers have been kind of hard on it. Then we have false sunflower, Heliopsis helianthinoides. And this is got to be one of my favorites. It's native to most of Minnesota, full to part sun, medium wet to medium dry soil, 2 to 5 feet, and it starts blooming in late June, and with just a couple of deadheading sessions, it will go until frost. Now you do get some seedlings if you don't deadhead, but I've gotten some interesting seedlings too, so don't be afraid to try it out. Now this one, in really hot, dry weather, can be attacked by red aphids. This past summer it was. As you know, it's still in a very dry period here. So this one took a few, I'd do some extra watering on this one and spray it off with a hose a few times. This is one that everybody that sees it loves it. Prairie smoke, Geum triflorum. It's native to Minnesota, only about 8 inches tall, full to part sun, spring bloom, and moist to dry, well-drained soil. It does not want to sit in soggy soil, but it does not want to dry out completely either. And this is the one where the seed heads, people see the seed heads and go, oh, that's so cool. Then we have prairie blazing star, which is native to most of Minnesota, and I'm guessing a lot of you are already growing it. Full to part sun. It's about 4 feet, although there are some shorter cultivars out there. Wet to medium wet soil and blooms late summer. And one of my favorite blazing stars is meadow blazing star, Liatris ligulostylus. It is an absolute monarch magnet. When it's in bloom, it's just covered with monarchs all the time. Native to almost all of Minnesota, full to part sun, medium wet to medium dry soil, not too soggy, not too, it's kind of one of those ones that likes it just right. 4 to 5 feet, and it may need staking. Every year I think we're going to make it, we're coming up, and then I've learned that sooner or later then I'm going to get a wind that's going to twist it around or bend it over. So I have learned I do need to stake it in the spring. It blooms late summer. And then we have pasque-flower. When I was growing up, I grew up near Royalton, which the soil is basically beach sand. And we had a whole hillside that would be absolutely covered with these in the spring. So it's native to about 2/3 of Minnesota, full to part sun, 6 inches tall, medium dry to dry alkaline soil. And we certainly have the alkaline soil here. Blooms in early spring. Some people sometimes call it crocus. It does look a little bit, but it's got very fuzzy seed coverings or bud coverings, which is part of its charm, I think. And then Michigan lily, Lilium michiganense. Native to most of Minnesota. It's not one you find easily. You'd probably have to find bulbs from a native nursery. Full to part sun, and unlike most lilies, this one likes wet to medium wet soil. If you grow lilies, you know one of the first rules of thumb is drainage, drainage, drainage. Well, this one will tolerate your wet spots. 5 feet tall and midsummer bloom, kind of a Turk's cap type orange lily. Then we're back to some phlox. Prairie phlox, Phlox pilosa, native to most of Minnesota, full to part sun, about 2 feet tall, medium wet to dry soil, so it's not too fussy on soil. And this one is a spring bloomer also. Joe Pye weed, and a few years ago they changed the botanical name from Eupatorium to Eutrochium maculatum, because we like to keep up with new things. It's native to most of Minnesota, 5 to 6 feet tall, full to part sun, and it prefers it wet to medium wet. Late summer bloom, and this is another one that the monarchs really, really like. And now this one got left in the Eupatorium class. Boneset, Eupatorium perfoliatum. Again, it's native to most of Minnesota. This would be sometimes called, you might have heard it as white snakeroot. Full to part sun, 4 feet, wet to medium wet soil. And this one blooms in the fall with white blooms. Yellow coneflower, Ratibida pinnata. It's native mainly to the southern third of Minnesota. Full to part sun, 4 to 5 feet, medium dry to dry soil, blooms late summer into fall. It's sometimes also called gray-headed coneflower. It's got the kind of droopy petals. And it is a pretty prolific reseeder, so if you don't want a ton of seedlings, you might want to do some deadheading and just drop the seed heads on a tray for the birds or something. Then we have wild bergamot, or Monarda fistulosa. It's native all over Minnesota, full to part sun. It can be anywhere from 3 to 4 feet. Medium wet to dry soil, so not too picky. And bloom time is usually July. And then this one, cup plant, Silphium perfoliatum. This is a big one, so if you have a small garden, you may want to think twice about putting this one in. I put mine, I just planted it out on the prairie when I got it, and lets it kind of, the prairie grasses keep it in check. So I've just got a small patch right now. It's native to the southern half of the state, likes full to part sun, 6+ feet. If you get plenty of moisture, you can easily top out at 7 or more. It likes medium wet to medium soil, and it blooms late in the summer. And the cup plant name comes because of the way the leaves clasp the stem. It forms a little cup at the base, and a lot of birds and insects drink water and dew out of those. Blue vervain, Verbena hastata. It's native to most of Minnesota, full to part sun, 4 to 5 feet, so it's, we don't have too many shrinking violets here in the natives. Wet to medium soil, and bloom time in late July. And this one is another great one for the pollinators. And then we have its cousin, hoary vervain, or Verbena stricta. And you can tell the difference because hoary vervain has kind of a downy, hairy leaf. It's native to the southern half of the state, about 2 feet, although I've seen it get taller. Full to part sun, and this one prefers it a little on the drier side, medium dry to dry soil. If it gets too much moisture, it tends to flop. So if you've got a drier spot for it, that's a great place to put it. And it has a long bloom time. If you deadhead, it'll keep blooming almost up until frost. This one is, I think, greatly underused, Culver's root, Veronicastrum virginicum. I had some several years ago, and then I had to move gardens. It got lost, and I just put some more in again this spring, so it'll take a year or two before it starts showing off. But native to most of Minnesota, sun to part sun, at least 5 feet tall, medium wet to medium dry soil, and a July-August bloom. The leaves are kind of a candelabra coming out from the stem, and then you have spikes of flowers above that. Ironweed, and I've been told by a reliable source that you might want to keep an eye on this one, that it does tend to reseed once it gets well established. Mine hasn't yet, but I will be keeping my eyes peeled. I do also have some out in the prairie. It seems to like the wetter areas, on the edge of the sloughs, sort of. Full to part sun, it's a good 6 feet. Medium wet to medium soil, and it blooms mid to late summer. And the shade of purple is just so intense with the light at that time of year. It's just really stunning. Then we're going to get on to some of the grasses. Little bluestem is probably one of my favorites. That is native to almost all of Minnesota. Full sun, and this one is a kind of medium to dry soil. It gets 3 to 4 feet. It's a warm season bunch grass, meaning it forms a clump, and the clump may expand somewhat, but it's not a runner. Warm season simply means I have people all the time go, I think my little bluestem died. It's not up yet. And I go, no, it's fine. Once you get that established, you're not going to kill it. It's fine. It just hasn't woken up yet. It doesn't wake up till the soil is warm. That's when they say a warm season grass. That's exactly what they mean. And then there's big bluestem, which is another favorite of mine, but it's not for the faint of heart. It can get 6 to 7 feet tall. So if you're in a small space, you may be dividing it a little more frequently than you would otherwise. Again, it's a warm season grass, so it does not start growth till the soil is warm. Like some medium wet to dry soil. Another clump former, so you don't have to worry about it running. And actually, so far, I've only gotten 1 or 2 seedlings from it. Although I do get some in my lawn from my prairie area sometimes, where the lawn is thinner. Switchgrass, Panicum virgatum. Again, it's native to almost all of Minnesota, full sun, medium wet to dry soil. It's a warm season grass. It is rhizomatous, meaning it does run underground, but they are short rhizomes. So it's not like some things that come up 2 feet away or 3, 5, 6 feet away. It'll just expand your clump slowly over time. Again, warm season. This is another late to break dormancy. Does not come up until the soil is warm. Now this one I just love, prairie dropseed. It's native to about 2/3 of Minnesota. Full sun, 2 feet, and a medium wet to a dry soil. And it makes these, it's kind of comes up like a fountain, and then it kind of flows over. And the seed heads, the blooms, will come up later in the summer. And now some people don't like this about it. I happen to love it. If you brush the stems, it'll smell like cilantro. So if you don't like cilantro, maybe don't put it where you can brush by it all the time, but I happen to love it. So populations of this are in decline in the wild. It's about 2 feet tall. It's a warm season grass again. Most of our natives are. And it's just, and all of the grasses are great for overwintering pollinators. A lot of them will overwinter in the stems or at the base. So if you can add even a few of these grasses to your flower beds, I think you'll be very happy with them. They are really, really fun plants. Another native grass is blue grama grass. It's native to the entire western half of Minnesota. It prefers full sun and a medium dry to dry soil. This is one that will die out over winter if you put it in an area that stays too wet. So I found that by putting it on a slight slope, so it's got the drainage, that I haven't had a problem with it dying out. It's another warm season grass, only 12 to 16 inches, and the blooms look like little eyelashes coming out the side. Let's see, how can I put this? It's just a fun little grass. You look at these very, very delicate stems, and surprisingly, I've had out here on the prairie, it's not uncommon to get 50, 60 mile an hour winds with blizzard conditions and the snow packing in, and a lot of times I'll come out and I'll see these little eyelashes just sticking up above the snow. It doesn't bend them over. They're so delicate they don't hold the snow, so they just stand up until they get completely covered. It's only about 12 to 16 inches tall, so it's one of the shorter ones. Okay, that kind of brings us to the end of the perennials and the grasses. And we're going to make the next portion a second show. So we're going to say goodbye for now, and then we're going to pick up again shortly with some shrubs and a few trees. See you next time.